It is truly an honour for me to introduce the National Secretary of the Maritime Union of Australia and the President of the International Transport Workers Federation, Comrade, Brother Paddy Crumlin.
It's thirsty work, as we say in Australia. I can see that first cold beer. Now, the first thing I'll do to stand up and fight back is take this coat off, fight back against the cold. It's about 40 degrees in Australia. So this is my commitment to internationalism. I got about 5 T-shirts on. Be careful about my stomach. So I got a few there, and it's about solidarity. Look, when you say stand up, fight back, it's about getting angry. What's happening in the world today is a disgrace. There's 7.5 billion people. 100 years ago, there was about 4 billion people. The polarisation in wealth across the board, so it's just not a Canadian thing. The polarisation in wealth because of this free trade, multinational capital, because of the weak people that have occupied political office in Canada and in Australia and across Europe and across countries, Western democracies that should know better, with proud labour movements. I mean, the labour movement, one of the great things that we're dealing here is the great lie. And Trump talks about false news. Well, I got some false news. They've been bullshitting and lying about the labour movement for the last 30 years. They've been saying that we're not relevant. They've been saying that working men and women don't want to be a part of it. They're saying that we're impediments to productivity. They're saying that if we're not here, that economies grow and people get better opportunities. That's the great lie. And because that lie has been told so pervasively by the big multinationals that control the media that Donald Trump listens to, Fox, Rupert Murdoch, an Australian, not proud of that. We've had some pretty good exports out of Australia. Harry Bridges was one. Rupert Murdoch fucking wasn't one. So this is a great lie in their self-interest. And so you've seen the polarisation of wealth, whereas the Oxfam stats, and it's increasingly polarising, have the 40 or 50th most wealthy people in the world controlling the same amount of wealth as 3.5 billion people. Now, that's no different in Canada than it is in South America or Africa. We're living in different cultural and political systems and economic systems, but that polarisation is no different. The productivity that you've delivered on the wharves, the automation that's happened on the wharves, the reduction in cruise sizes under national laws here in Australia, here in Canada, and in Australia and across, that has not been rewarded by wages and jobs. That's been an opportunity to take away and replace those workers that have been in a social contract, that have had a social relationship with their employer, under the legally and under the legislative changes by governments that have a responsibility to the citizens of their countries. That's resulted in the collapse of the minimum wage. That's resulted in casual work. That's resulted in the outsourcing of our jobs. Cabotage isn't just a Canadian thing. Cabotage is just not an Australian thing or a US thing or a Japanese thing or a Filipino thing. If you can take away the sovereign wealth, if you can take away a workforce in a country, in a key transport industry, they talk about security, they talk about the importance of our borders, they talk about all of the great lies that they're visiting on all of us in our communities, the fears, but at the same time, they can bring in a workforce predicated upon people registering their ships in Liberia or in Panama or in Monrovia, refusing to pay their seafarers. and having them operating in full time within a Canadian territory or an Australian territory or a US territory. Now, if they can do that to you, they can do that to dock workers. They have that, and that's the lead into self-handling by seafarers. That's the lead into the next stage of the mega consolidation of international shipping and freight forwarding. The global network terminals, the big ship owners, the logistics change, moving through mining into manufacturing, into retail. Where are they going? They're going through your ports. They're going through your airports. They're going down your roads. They're going on your ships. They're going through our communities. And the only people not winning in this are the workers that live there and the communities that are nurtured by those jobs. So with this great polarisation of wealth, with this great polarisation of power, where are we going to be in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time in Canada, in the UK, in Japan, in Spain, where dock workers are fighting for their rights now? They're fighting for their hiring haul. They're fighting against casualisation of their jobs. They're fighting against automation that is union busting. It's not productivity, it's union busting. And they're the same companies operating here in Canada. DP World, APM, Hutchinson. You go through every one of them, tying in with the big ship owners. See, we've been at the front. Maritime workers have been at the front. Aviation workers have been in the front line because of our exposure to international trade. We have clawed out of the granite of opposition, government opposition. When you look at the history of the ILWU or the history of Unifor or the history of my union, you look at any of the histories that you won the conditions, clawed out of the granite of hard work, industrial action, people sticking together, people starving and going to jail, even to the extent in San Francisco, ILWU members murdered in their own port in front of their own area of picking up their hiring haul for no other reason that they wanted a fair shake and a fair deal. Murdered. And still being murdered by some of these global network terminal operators in Honduras and in Ecuador. Now, this is a serious issue. If we're going to have these multinationals come into Canada or into Australia, and they're predicated upon tax avoidance, they're banked and banked and backed by banks that destroyed the largest amount of wealth, your community wealth, your family's wealth, your country's sovereign wealth, the greatest destruction in wealth ever seen in the history of humankind in 2008. Where are they now? Barclays, the LIBOR rate, the rorting and the criminalisation. These governments, you know, when you talk about Hawkins and Howard in Australia, the neoconservative agenda, which was removing you from the workplace, breaking the trade union movement, and in breaking the trade union movement, having the great lie that they can do anything they want. Their executive wealth, have a look at where they live and what they earn, billions of dollars. When the workforces that they're preying on and cannibalising, what's happening to them? Automated out of their jobs. In regards to cabotage, replaced by foreign labour, by casual work, their penalty rates on weekends going. So what happens when you want to buy a house? What happens when you think of the young men and women that I'm looking around here? What happens here in Vancouver, one of the most expensive places in the world to get a house? Are working men and women going to have homes here in this city in 20 years' time or 30 years' time? Are you going to go and have hospitals so that if you are crook and infirm at that period of your life, when you need support more than anything, and you've got no insurance, and no one's backing it because they've privatised the medical infrastructure? If you want to drive on a road and you can't afford to drive on the road, and the road's in disrepair because the people that privatised it gouged out the money and took all of that money and didn't replace it with any quality community services. You think about schooling and the removal of the rights of education of working men and women, aspirational, the right to improve your life, the right to have a job, the right to go home safely, the right to be able to be educated and aspire for something better, all removed because of the great lie, because of the polarisation of wealth and power. See, we're not just standing here for cabotage. We're not just standing here against automation and the union busting. We're not just standing here to make sure that that airport down the road is properly unionised, is safe and belongs to the community. We're here to ensure that the community of Canada, the community of Australia, the community of the UK, in the South Sudan, where 1 million people are dying and no one gives a flying fuck about it. All of the things that we're saying, we're living in a world where enough's enough. So when we say stand up, we're saying it across the community of Canada. We're saying it across the community of Australia and the US, South America, Latin America, Africa, Europe, throughout Japan and Southeast Asia. We're saying that we're going to reclaim this world. We're not going to have politicians that continue to desert us, that continue to propagate the great lie, that continue to rob us, that continue to be conspiring for taxation avoidance and the criminality that's brought this society and societies across the world into such disrepair. We are reclaiming our lives, our working lives, our lives in retirement, our children's lives and our future. Stand up! Stand up! And we will make sure that we have governments, whether it's provincial governments, council governments, national governments, that are there for the working people and working communities and not just feathering their own bloody net. Enough's enough. Get the fuck out, because we are mobilising and motivating and we are going to reclaim this world. So, we are the union.
We are the union.
The mighty, mighty union.
The mighty, mighty union.
We are the union.
We are the union.
The mighty transport unions.
The mighty transport unions.
We are the unions.
We are the union.
The mighty shipping unions.
The mighty shipping union.
The mighty dockers unions.
The mighty dockers union.
The ass-kicking unions.
The ass-kicking unions.
We are the union.